recording the meeting. So starting again, we've just started recording. So anything that you say will be documented and recorded. And also, if you're not that familiar with Zoom, there is the couple different features. You can do a speaker view or a gallery view, but we thought it was important, instead of doing a webinar, to actually have the screen open so we could all see each other and create more strength between our Boston programs. For someone who hasn't been on one of these summits before, South End Soccer started launching these several years ago and then continued them again this year as a way to collaborate and strengthen and provide more resources to our programs within the city and in Greater Boston. We just went through our introductions. We're going to go through, and we know there's a lot of information that's been coming at people, and so we've put together some links to some varied resources that we think are really helpful for people. We will email this presentation out to everybody afterwards, so you have the links. We can add them to the chat as we go, but Mass Youth Soccer, particularly, and the Commonwealth have done a very good job of written material, webinars, and other things. So we really want to utilize this time to clarify information for people and resources for people, as opposed to educate. We'll go through some of that, and then Soccer Superstars, their wheelhouse is working with 5 to 8-year-olds and communicating with a lot of programs. That seems to be a space that people are trying to figure out how to navigate getting players on the field safely with physical distancing. So they're going to go through a few things with us. South End Soccer, we were able to test out some programming over the summer, so we thought it would be helpful to share with you what we did that might be helpful. And then we'll just open it up to the group for Q&A for the remainder of the time till 6 o'clock, as we can share and collaborate, and any questions specifically you have for our leadership of Paul McCaffrey from Boston Parks and Rec, Mike Borislow from Mass Youth Soccer, and Tony Loftus from Bays. So the first thing is our resources. I want to just make sure that I note here, everything that's mentioned here generally is most up to date as September 4th, but please do not use this as your one and only guide. Please go back to Mass Youth Soccer. Please go back to the Commonwealth. Please contact the city directly for the most up-to-date information. This, as we all know, in this time period, this literally could change as I'm speaking. So, but here are some links to some information we thought would be really helpful for you. So one, of course, is the most up-to-date information from the Commonwealth, which is the highest level of directive. The next are all the webinars and materials and information that Mass Youth Soccer has been publishing on a regular basis around returning to play, specifically their handbook with all of the guidelines that includes things for coaches, organizations, and other information that is really a go-to template that we've been using. They specifically have a checklist that organizations can use to go through and make sure that they're preparing properly as they're getting on the field. And if you're a member of Mass Youth Soccer, their mandatory waiver registration language, which has been updated. I'm going to move on from there. I'm not going to open all the links. You'll get these links when we after the meeting. They also have some really great resources, which we specifically have utilized. And I actually know from speaking with Mass Youth Soccer, they have people across the state and the country that actually utilize what they do. So they have physical distance plans that they've set up for varied age groups. They have now also put these in Spanish. Thank you very much to the staff there. And all of those resources are there online for you. And they also have coach trainings if you'd like them. They have the game modifications, which is a guideline that Boston is using also. And they have specific webinars around that. There's links here. And then also they have posted videos of both high school girls and high school boys playing the modified games that are approved for Mass Youth Soccer programs. So that's all there for you. You can go to their YouTube website and also their website to get that information. So now I'm going to pause for 1 second before I pass it off to Bob. Is there anything specific around what I just mentioned that someone wants a clarification about? Not specifically in detail, but just something maybe that I didn't mention or someone else wants to mention as a resource. And you can, if there are other things you know about, you can put it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself if there's something else that you think would be helpful for people. Okay, so I'm gonna pass it off to, and as we're having this conversation, anything that you think of that may be helpful to other people, please add it in the chat so that we can share it with each other. I'm gonna pass it off now to Bob. They've been working with youth virtually and also in person with the age group of 5 to 8. So he's going to share with us what they found as successful and able to navigate with physical distance programming. So thank you, Bob.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Caroline. And thanks to everyone for allowing me to be part of this and learn and share with the group. Really appreciate it. Yeah, so as Caroline said, we've been working, we worked in the virtual space when this first hit, and then we have been running in-person camps and classes across the country. So obviously we've faced different state, county, city guidelines that we've had to adhere to. So we took the most stringent ones and we implemented that. So as we looked at it, we looked at things outside of the class and then inside of the class. And a lot of the challenges that we faced was, how are we gonna make a really interactive session for younger children, starting as young as 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and also focus on the social emotional aspect, which has been so key to the development during this time. We've spent a lot of time behind a camera. We looked at how do we then put this onto the field. So outside of the class, obviously we focused on all of the COVID overviews and policies that we had to think about, from coaches wearing PPE. We added an additional stipend for our coaches for sanitizing, so they can ensure every single item was sanitized pre and post class, every single session. And then we looked at the in-class experience. So we looked at the in-class experience and we said, right, now we're going to put, each player is going to be assigned a space on arrival. So when they arrive at a session, when they're dropped off, we'll give them a number and they'll be assigned a space on the field. So the number that they're given will correlate to where they're going to participate. So we minimize the interaction between participants and the players. As you can see on the screen, we set it up in a quadrant approach. There's actually 6 foot between each quadrant here. That allows the coach to move around. Also the parents then, for the younger ages, the parents were assigned their space so they can see and observe. For the classes, for the youngest, for the 4s and 5s, the parents stick around, but for the olders, we based it upon a purely drop-off approach. Then we looked at our class fill. On here, we started with 10, but then we actually reduced it to 8, and we said, look, socially responsible thing to do for us with these younger age groups would be a ratio of 8 to 1. That's going to allow us to provide that individualized attention and really identify individual learner needs, because we saw this as a really great opportunity for us, for children to develop on their own. So we would deliver the content and then the coach would move around, giving individualized instruction to each player as they work on their individual skills. So then we said, right, we have the skills. The skills are the easy part, right? And the repetition of technique, which is what we've seen. It's almost a return to block practice, the things that we used to do as a child, knocking the ball against the wall with high repetition. And we said, how can we really make this social? So we looked at it and we said, okay, what we want to do is we want the glow and grow moment for every child within the class. We're going to use more peer-to-peer modeling in here. So in every session, we want to give a spotlight to every single child if they want it. So we'll offer it first and foremost. Is anybody willing to share? Does anybody want to demo this particular skill for us or anything that we've been working on? So that allowed us to go around the quadrant, allow the child to shine, and then the players would try and implement that, or try and repeat it. And on top of that, we said, how can we continue to build? So we looked at, yes, we have ball mastery, but then we said, right, can we introduce some relays? So the players will participate. Maybe they're doing some individual ball work. Maybe they're going around 5 or 6 cones and they score a goal, then they give a virtual high five. So they give the virtual high five, the next person goes. And what we did, we were able to create everybody cheering each other on, having the moment of celebration, but while continuously getting that repetition. So when I give you the high five, we then go back and we keep doing our skill building activity so we get high reps within that. The way we did it is any normal session. We might start unopposed, limited, just try your skills. Then we had the obstacles, then time, play against the coach, and then obviously to goal. Those are the types of things that we were able to interweave. And then the games at the end, you know, you talk about game modifications, everybody playing individually. So we took it and we said, you know, half the quadrant, how many goals can we get in 60 seconds? This other half, how many goals can you get in 60 seconds? Because we wanted to show that everybody's individual contribution is going to lead to a group outcome. So we looked at all those different things. And what we've been able to do collectively across the country is we've partnered with obviously a lot of schools, some soccer clubs delivering the 5 to 9, particularly in this individualized approach. We built out a special, a different curriculum. We took the Zoom format and put it into in-person and really focused on social emotional. So the key things for us was each player, designated space, learning at their own speed. We facilitate the individual learner's needs, but we want to focus really on the psychosocial as well. That goes on top of that. They were the real main takeaways for us. And then everything that's in the class, outside of the class, was obviously the COVID protocols that we all follow, and it changes every single week. So we've had to keep following that. Happy to answer any questions, happy to send anything and everything that we put together. I think it's really important that we all share. What's good for soccer is good for everybody at this time.
Thank you so much, Bob. Is there anyone that has a question about working with this age group as they're preparing to get on the field that they'd like to ask Bob specifically? You can just unmute yourself.
Bob, is there are those like plexiglass partitions between the players?
It's a great question. So what we did, we had 2 or 3 different approaches. Those players are actually anywhere between 6 foot and 9 foot apart, so you didn't have to use that. But in some cases, we actually put netting up. You know, we got corner flags and we put netting between the players, and or because they were 6 foot or 9 foot, and in some cases we had 10 foot between the players. We used those larger cones so the ball wouldn't roll into each other. Then the coach would be in the middle as well. So there'd be 6 foot between the coach and between 6 and 10 foot between every single player. And I'm happy to share a picture or a video that kind of shows that, and if it'll help somebody else facilitate that in their own space.
Anyone else have a question for Bob?
I do. So it seems like with every quadrant, you have the same equipment, so cones and a goal. Is that for every single session? Is that like your standard equipment for every practice? Is that every student has a cone and a goal and a ball? And did you supply the kids balls that they take home and bring back, or
great question? Great, yeah. So we had to make some modifications to our to equipment, right? So we got rid of pennies, for example. We stopped giving out the soccer balls. Every child now brings their own ball. We will take extra soccer balls, which we will sanitize if a child needs to use them. And in some cases, on arrival, we've had everybody sanitize the soccer balls. The equipment is sanitized prior to the children arriving, so they can move the cones around. And then immediately after, we'll sanitize it. But every child brings a ball, but we will have some spare, and we'll wait until they arrive and sanitize them in front of them and the parents so they can see, and then we'll hand it off to them. Good question on that one. Yeah.
Any other questions? So as Bob mentioned, he said he'd be happy to share his contact information. We'll send that out with the presentation afterwards. He said he's happy to connect with people, and they have staff local too that you could get connected with. So I really appreciate Bob made himself available very quickly for this, and I really appreciate that, Bob. I know it myself personally for our program, and also speaking with other programs, this is the age group that there's a little bit of how in the world do you physically distance these kids. So thank you very much. So I'm gonna let So Fee Wynn has just joined us. I'm going to let you introduce yourself, Fee, if you're able to get on screen. Or unmute.
Hello, can you see me?
Yeah.
Hello. Hey, how are you guys doing today? Good. My name is Fee Wynn. I'm the Director of Coaching for South End Soccer. Been with South End Soccer for the past 7 years. We had a great time this past last month doing the physical distancing training there or so. Do you want me to explain more there, Caroline? Or?
Yeah, if I'll pull up the couple slides that you used for your parent and your coach meetings.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go ahead, Fee, and roll through. What
So the sessions that we had 2 different groups for each of the days that we were at Carter Field. Session 1, they were within parameters that we have. We had, believe it was 10 players per each session from the time periods of when they arrived, when they got checked in, they got their hand sanitized. They went to the player pods, as I mentioned on the screen. And afterwards, went to the player pods of putting their belongings down, making sure they have their face mask on before they arrived, and when they went to the pods, they still had their face mask on. Only time they took the face mask off was when they were drinking water, and then they put it back on. Then afterwards, they went to the stretching yoga grid or so that I've had that I can pull up there real quick to Caroline.
Sure.
Yep. So basically, they were in the yoga grid, yoga session there. So with Yoga Mike, the players were doing a lot of dynamic stretching, warming up, just to mentally get them ready for the session at hand. It was very fun. Even the coaches got involved as well to stretches. So it was a great time with the Yoga Mike and with the players. Getting on the field, mentally prepared for what's at hand. It was interesting. It was pretty fun. If you go to the next slide real quick there, Caroline. Yep. Then we have different sessions as throughout the full field. They had 4 different grids or so within the fields. We had, like I said, on the bottom left, we had soccer, tennis. It was pretty much everything was on the ground there. So we had soccer bowling, which we used 2-liter bottles for. Very interesting, very fun. The players had a great time with that. We did soccer golf. Which it was very interesting, and they had a fun time with the chipping the ball and so forth. I mean, overall, everything was very distancing there, so in terms of making sure that the players, were not in contact with each other. The coaches touched the ball, controlled the cones, and so forth. So everything was there. It was ball to foot at all the times there. So, and I think, is that it there, Caroline? Was there anything else there?
Yeah, I think that's great. So I just go back to the beginning. Yep. This is what Fee talked about with the player pod. So basically, the kids, it's a recommended practice by Mass Youth Soccer, and it's all on their website. They have a bunch of practice plans. But the idea is, as soon as the child checks in and does hand sanitizer, they go directly to their space with their equipment. So we create this scenario from the point 1 that you're running on the field and grabbing the ball and going and playing. Like, you have a station, you have a pod that you go to, and that's your space to go. And if you need a break or you need water or you want to relax, just to create that environment right from the beginning. And I have to say, we had great responsiveness from the parents and the players. We had kids from age 9 all the way through 13. I remember Fee noting that he definitely saw like an engagement level of the kids increasing, and then he added in more trainings the second week. Beyond what we did with the games, with the bowling and the tennis. We tried to do pretty much everything that is prescribed as a member of Mass Youth Soccer, which we did a Zoom call with all the parents. If they couldn't attend, we called them. We had them sign an additional waiver. We sent them materials, and then we made sure that there was physical distance spacing when they arrived. And for this initial time, like Bob had mentioned, we also did drop off only, because we just needed to gauge what we could manage from having also the guardians / spectators / parents in attendance, especially in an urban environment. Does anyone have any questions about the programming that we did?
How many kids did you have each session?
So we didn't have, what was the most we had, 10, Fee?
And that's correct. No more than 10 per each group for that session. Yeah.
And because initially when we built this out, we were in the building process when we were in phase 2. And so if you're not familiar with the phases, everything's on the Commonwealth's website. But so this structure that we built, we could do if we go back to phase 2. And so we wanted to build a baseline that from here we can add in more typical training that you would see with physical distance, or add in scrimmages or interleague games. But this gave us a baseline. And at that point when we were building it, you could only have 10. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else have a question? And of course, Fee and I will send our information too. Please contact with any questions you have as you're getting ready. So we wanted to make sure that really a focus on this was the moment to give people to really get clarifications that they need. We felt that was very important. So I've got a few questions that were sent in ahead of time that I'm going to go ahead and ask out to Paul and Mike and Tony. And then if you have another question and you want to put it in the chat, we can answer that question. I know, Tony, you may need to be answering in chat. You sounded great before, so I know you.
I feel great if that matters. I'm back to my usual talkative self, and that's usually danger for everybody else.
Okay, all right. Your dental work went well. So, so I'm going to start off with the questions that we had sent in ahead of time, and then you can put anything you want in the chat, and then we can just open it up for conversation. So the first question we had here, so for Paul, are there any restrictions for Boston permits that may vary from Mass Youth Soccer guidelines for number of players on the field, number of spectators, of type of play, like practice versus games?
So, just move a little closer. The first thing I want to say is congratulations to the Mass Youth Soccer for their leadership in the state and trying to pull everybody together, and then also trying to advocate to the state about the ability to come back to play, to be safe. That, I think, other than the ice skating guys and the golf guys, the Mass Youth Soccer was the ones that really tried to push this ahead, and not necessarily no profit motive in the other two industries that actually, made headway before Mass Youth Soccer did. The biggest thing, the underwriting concern about the city of Boston, for everybody's understanding, is that, we're not trying to be meanies. We're not trying to, prevent people from playing, but some of the things that have been very disturbing this past summer is a number of illegal soccer tournaments that have gone on, and then have turned into, and they basically have been people who have been unpermitted and have been infringed on kids' time. Like Steve Bennett will tell you that he had some issues. Nathan will tell you that they had some issues with people there. And so, like last weekend at Roberts Playground, there was a horrible, there was 3 stabbings and a shooting that happened down there. And so the idea is, City of Boston does not want to have large gatherings and under the guise of saying there's a soccer game or a softball game, not to pick on soccer, but on a softball game, and that these roving tournaments and people who are playing for money is an issue. Now, that's not an issue for youth soccer, but that is an issue for some of the people who coach, who do play in some of these things, and they should know that. The ability to bring this disease or this illness back to a number of people has been proven over and over again. The city of Everett just closed all their parks this morning at 6 o'clock. The town of Dedham is the town of Dedham on the south end of us. It's the same way. Lynn, Chelsea, Revere is very close to East Boston. East Boston's numbers are up in the sense of that they're almost the same as Chelsea, Everett, and Revere. And so the problem is that community goes back and forth. You know, there's no borders between those communities and say East Boston. And so there's the reasoning behind this 14 thing is under 14 is to keep the crowds at a minimum, and then also allow youth to play. I didn't. This is from the reopening committee or the COVID operations committee for the city of Boston, and also the Boston Public Health Commission. We deal with them almost every day, and so as all of you, we keep seeing different things, coming back and forth. And so my job has been try to stay on top of some of that stuff. And I think that Michael and the team at Mass Youth Soccer have done an incredible job about trying to deal with the state and just try to, there's things that have come out, like the original document from the saying soccer was accepted and that document said soccer was accepted in one paragraph, and then soccer wasn't accepted in the other paragraph. So it's almost like, every day we have to read these things really closely. So as far as the age group, now I don't know what, I've basically been going by the 50 per field, and that's been acceptable to the city of Boston. I put in all the permits, social distancing and, facial coverings at all times, and no spectators, and one guardian/parent per child. I don't know if that's any different, Michael, than what you guys have put out, but that's basically what the city of Boston is trying to do.
You mind if I just add on to that, Caroline? So, Paul, thank you very much for the compliments. We really appreciate it. I kind of joke with a lot of people who, when we put all these modifications out, they basically, what are you doing to the game? Oh my gosh! Next thing you know, you guys are going to roll. We'll have to play with a square ball, and sometimes I feel like that's what we rolled out. But we're very fortunate to be able to play the game. There still is 14 states that don't permit play at all, game wise. They're still at the 6-foot distancing, and that's it, and for practices. So we're lucky to get out there. I'll stick to the gathering question. Is our gathering sits, the EEA who put out the information says it's 25 participants per field. So if it's a practice, you could have 24 kids and one coach, or 23 and two coaches on a field. And that could be an 11v11 field or a 9v9 field, as long as it's clearly designated as a playing surface. You're permitted up to 50 spectators per field, really, for games. There's no need to have 50 spectators for a practice, but for games. However, we are going with the same, is that what we've decided to do is it's limited to 1 spectator per player. So unless you've got 2 rosters of 25 kids, there's no reason why you'll ever max out more than 50. So you'll always be well below the 50 by having 1 spectator. Now, of course, we do permit parents to have another child with them if they don't have any child care alternatives available to them. So if you've got a parent bringing a child to a game or a practice and they have another child that they just don't have any care arranged, it's okay to have that child with them. Has to be with them at all times, and it has to be with them in where they're sitting. This is not free roaming. It's find your spot, sit, and 6 feet away. So we're right on in line with what Boston's doing.
Great. Thank you both. So this one's for you. Oh, so Paul, you pretty much answered it. There was a question about the decision of having no ages over 14, no adults. So you've kind of clarified that already. And then for Paul or Mike, tournaments are not allowed by the state. Are there any issues or concerns if teams travel to other states and play tournaments?
I mean, from a public health, sorry, I'll just chime in. From the
Yeah.
city, like I'm starting to talk through right now about, Everett and Dedham, and it's like, do we allow Everett and Dedham or people from hot zones come into the city of Boston and play? And the same thing with tournaments. I think that if you take a look at, some of the college outbreaks, I think it's unwise, in my personal opinion, that it's unwise, and particularly if you go to a state like, it's interesting that Maine has still prohibited residents of Massachusetts to go to Maine without having a negative COVID test or sheltering in place or quarantining for 14 days in that town. So the issue is going to be, if you have a kid that is playing at an elite level and who has the opportunity to go out of state, you may not want that kid to come back in your program for the exception, or while he quarantines. If you take a look at the two breweries in Everett last week, someone had actually gone. They were waiting for their test results, and then went, and then basically called up the brewery and said, "Hey, I got COVID," and closed down two breweries for 2 days to do a deep cleaning. Boston College diving and swim team today, 17 of their members are positive for COVID today. So the issue of, it is real. And, one of the issues in the back of the city of Boston's head, as far as in a number of neighborhoods, our folks are overhoused in some situations where you have sometimes 3 generations in one housing unit. And so the possibility of passing it along really quickly. So I think it's I think it's up to the individual's responsibility. And then also the organization's responsibility. If you know some kid who's gone out of, it's not necessarily competing, but say one of the kids goes and visits relatives in Georgia. Do you want that child to come back and play with those kids if he hasn't quarantined and not following the state regs? So as far as the official position of the city of Boston, it's the same as the state of Massachusetts.
So thanks, Paul, for sharing the stance. We're pretty much close in line, but actually we make it rather clear. On our website, under the Return to Soccer Activities webpage, as well as on the insurance webpage, we're rather clear, is Massachusetts is not at level 4 yet. Level 4 is when tournaments can be played for youth sports. So there are no tournaments permitted in the state of Massachusetts. So our stance is that we are not going to permit members of Mass Youth Soccer to circumvent that and go play in a tournament out of state. So if a club decides to take a team out of state to play in a tournament, they're doing so totally on their own, not underneath our umbrella, and none of our insurance will travel with them. Now, in order to travel out of state, most tournaments require a permission to travel form. And that's kind of a gatekeeper, so to say. I talked to the folks in Connecticut. There's a tournament going on there. And they said, we've got some Massachusetts teams who want to come down and play. We understand that they're not allowed to. I say, well, you have to require that permission to travel form, because we're not going to issue them one. So that keeps them from traveling out of state. Maine, you mentioned Maine. Maine is not even one of the states that's not even allowing soccer games to be played. Their state's basically like we were back in phase 1, actually at phase 2, which was 6-foot practices only. So that's where Maine is. But New Hampshire has tournaments. Connecticut does. It's interesting. Connecticut won't let teams from Connecticut come up to Mass, but it'll let Mass teams come to Connecticut. The one state that, which basically it's a stay away from state, is Rhode Island. Teams from Rhode Island, and this is all based on the Massachusetts travel order. This is not Mass Youth Soccer, not the city of Boston. This is the governor's travel order. That if you're a resident of Rhode Island and you're on a team that comes up to Massachusetts to play, The only way they can play is, number one, come up and quarantine for 2 weeks and then play, or every single child and person in that car coming over the border must have tested negative in the last 72 hours. Highly unlikely that's going to happen. Flip side, any teams that travel down to Rhode Island because they're a non-low-risk state, that if they travel down there to play a game, when they come back, the Massachusetts requires they quarantine for 2 weeks or show a negative test result in a 72-hour period. So once again, it's what the governor and the reopening committee and our DPH is trying to do is everything possible to stem the the grabbing the virus from outside our borders and bringing it in. Some of the questions that come up is certain people may have a reluctance. Some leagues are going to have limited schedules, and some towns and programs are not going to play in the league, but they're going to have their own in-town play and potentially some friendlies. And so some of the concerns some people have is it okay to travel from a yellow zone town to a red town or vice versa? Mass Youth Soccer's position is that that's not our decision. That's the decision of a local organization. If they don't want to do that, that's fine. We support it. We don't. We won't look at them any differently. But what we have to remember is there are so many towns that are bordering each other. I live in Methuen, next door to Lawrence. Lawrence is red. Methuen has been yellow. Methuen just it goes back and forth. But each individual organization can make the decision if they would like their teams to play cross county. What we all need to understand is that clubs are made up of children from various towns. So, and even if you take a look at even Boston itself, and if Paul was to break Boston down into its neighborhoods or districts or zones, it's like a cluster of separate towns where there's certain rates in one section compared to another section. That's an individual decision. What we believe, as long as everybody follows the guidelines, everybody uses the PPE properly, everybody makes sure that their kids are healthy when they come out, that we're doing everything possible to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. And so we do have an out-of-state travel policy in place.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul and Mike. So I don't see more questions in the chat. If anybody wants to unmute themselves and ask a question, go right ahead.
Rafa, please.
If there's anything that someone wants to ask, please feel free. This is your moment. You've got Paul McCaffrey here. You've got Michael Borslow and Tony Loftus here. So this is your chance.
So while we're waiting for a question to come in, we are aware, I just want to point out a few things that we are aware that some of the folks here are, members of Mass Youth Soccer. Some are providing services to the children of Boston and the surrounding areas. It's great to see the representation from Boston Scores on as well. They're in a lot of various communities. Had a nice conversation with Ed at the foundation yesterday with regards to the great work you're all doing. But those that are members of Mass Youth Soccer, JP, Dorchester, South End, I'm sure I'm going to Parkway. I'll probably miss one or two here. But if you are not going to be providing any soccer activities this fall, for various reasons, concern for health and safety, concerns about liability, concerns about field availability, you name it. What you have to do at a minimum is register your board of directors as adults with Mass Youth Soccer. Because if you don't register your board and register not all your coaches and everything, but yet at least your board and any other adults that will be involved in doing soccer work during this fall and into the winter, You have to register and affiliate them with us, so you're all covered by our insurance program for everything else that you do. Directors and officers insurance, cyber insurance, theft insurance, you name it. Because if you don't affiliate anybody with us because you're not providing services, then you could be in the lurch. And so we just need, at a minimum, need to get those adults registered with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Pointing that out, Mike. Anyone else want to pop in with a question? We've got, 5-10 minutes.
That was actually,
Go ahead, Lisa. That was actually one of my questions about the insurance. Dorchester's not planning on doing anything, but we thought maybe we would try a couple of small skill sessions. So would those kids that register for that need to get the insurance?
Yeah, great question, Lisa. So in essence, there's a difference between, and I hate to say, providing no services, but maybe we will, because insurance companies don't go by but maybe. They either go, you're registered or you're not. So if you will be providing some skilled clinics, and what we see from a lot of organizations that are on the fence right now, they're waiting to see what happens with the schools, whether schools are going to go back, they're going to be a hybrid and such. There's a lot of people on the fence, and what they may end up doing, and probably, Lisa, you'd be in this case, is that, well, you know what, maybe we'll provide something for the month of October and first 2 weeks of November. And so if that's the decision down the road, you just typically, you do your normal player registration process, upload that information, to our registration system, fill out the form, the registration form and fee form, and send it up to Rachel Wu, and you'll be all set and you'll be covered.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead, Elise.
Yeah, I just, I guess had a request that the city, Paul, thank you for explaining the city's position on why competitive play is allowed for kids or age 14 and younger, but not older. And I guess just a request to provide that explanation kind of more broadly. I know that within our organization and then in other organizations that we talk to, there's a lot of confusion about that. And then also just to make the observation that, not all high school soccer teams, high school age soccer teams get a lot of fans. And I've been to many boys high school games and girls high school games, and I can tell you there is a difference in crowd size. And so that might really sting for, youth groups who don't typically get a lot of fans, being told that because other teams tend to, they can't play. Just.
I mean, that's not us. That's the state of Massachusetts. So the thing is that, and I'm gonna try. I've been, by the way, just one of your folks had emailed me side this morning about
Right.
Yeah. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna have more signage. And I've been talking. I talked to the District 13 Community Service Sergeant, also Paul DeLeo, who's the Sergeant for District 4, which is the South End, and then Frank Hughes, who runs his own soccer program in Brighton. And so what we're going to try to do is we're trying to, and then the other thing too is the Boston Public Health Commission has an outreach team that's going to go. So when I know when the start of your programs are going to be, I'm going to turn that information over to the Boston Police and the Boston Public Health Commission, and then I will probably be putting signs up myself. And Northeastern at Carter is very concerned, Caroline, and they've asked for more signs. But the biggest thing is that people you don't know, you don't necessarily, and they show up without a mask. Why are they there? There's no games, so I mean, it depends on what kind of competition you have. If it's everybody within your own organization, then everybody's on the same page. If it's people who just show up, then we're going to try to deal with that, at least.
I think.
Right. Yeah. That was just for everyone's background. Yeah, that was for a question that we had. We often have other people trying to use the field during times that we have permitted. And, you know, pre-pandemic, that's frustrating. But in the pandemic, that could basically shut us down because we don't feel that that's within the state guidelines, within Mass Youth Soccer's guidelines, and we don't, you know, feel like obviously it's aligned with the public health perspective. So that's why we reached out to Paul about ways that the city could partner with us to try to keep those groups off so that we can maintain the appropriate spacing.
I mean, part of the problem is, and even if you take a look at anything the governor and the state of Massachusetts come out with, it was only recently, the last 3 weeks, that the fine structure and the COVID task force has come out. So Boston has basically been doing with the outreach team, and in some places district police officers have been doing individual things. In District 13, or sorry, District 3, Mattapan and Dorchester, we've had one particular police officer who has, you know, decided, you know, and been assigned to being able to try to break up some of these large events. So we're really counting on people's civic mindedness, you know, and you know, everybody now at this point, we've gone through this. People, if they don't get it at this point, then I don't know how else that any of us can get to them other than having, you know, physically asking them to, you know, move or take police action. If you're in Massachusetts right now and you don't realize the rules, you've been living under a rock.
I will say too, which might help you because we were on the field this summer, and we were at Carter, and we run into the same thing, right? Ever since we started the program, there's always people getting on the field in the space that we're not in. The language that we found really helpful is we walked over to people and we asked them to please leave. We cleared the field, you know, through the time. And so one of the things that Mass Youth Soccer has is that you need a COVID coordinator on the field. So there's the COVID officer that's doing so our COVID coordinator was really a field monitor, and I did it too. And we walk around and just say, you know, we have a permit for the field right now. Due to contact tracing needs, we need you to actually leave because we can't, you know, monitor that. And it was language that people got. Like, it wasn't, they weren't offended, and they left. And we would be there for 2 hours, and I would probably have to kick off, you know, 10 or 15 groups or people during that time period. And it's going to be a challenge. And we've also talked with Northeastern. We talked, you know, we're going to be in connection with the police, and we're telling people that are on the field that if anyone gives you an issue, you just dial 911. Period. Like, this isn't a debate. You need to go. This is a pandemic.
Elise, just so you know, John Doherty, who's the district sergeant for your district, he told me specifically that you can contact him directly. And what they'll do is, once we figure out when you start,
Okay.
we'll send them by. You know, they're gonna want to try to come by. You know, obviously it's not a high priority in the sense of, but
Yeah.
they would like to try to make an effort to be there when you guys start. We also don't have the Boston schools are not playing games. As far as I know, the parochial high schools, Boston College High School, and Cathedral and / Cristo Rey and Catholic Memorial, they're the only ones that are out doing any in games. So where they may do games, they may not. It's just a question. They're waiting and seeing like what the other people in their conferences are going to do. So, but you know, again, this disparity between the public high schools and the private and also the parochial is, you know, it's maddening, because you go to one town and the rules change, like Michael talked about, and, you know, and it's like one high school's doing one thing and another high school's not doing it another. And the other sport that I've only heard from is cross country. So it looks like the BPS is going to go into what they're calling Fall 2, and that'll be in February and March. And then they're going to go into baseball and softball, and, you know, and it looks like it'll go all the way to July. So yeah, so it's and if it's confusing for you guys, it's confusing for people like me and Michael who have to pay attention to it all the time.
I want to be very respectful of people. We are at 6 o'clock. You know, if Paul and Mike have a minute or two more and there's another question, I don't want to keep you though. If there is someone else that has something they want to ask real quick, because you have them here, please do before we sign off. Is there anyone else that has a quick question? Okay. This is super helpful. I really appreciate, you know, Paul and Mike and Tony and Bob making yourselves available so quickly so that we could actually get some people some clarity before they're getting back on the field. And with each of your organizations, oh, Eve has a question. Sure, Eve, go right ahead.
Sorry, I was trying to go in and out. This is more for Paul. Paul, do you get a sense that even though BPS athletics is not going to have games, they will still be running practices in one way or another?
Eve, I think you guys have more up-to-date information than I do as far as that goes. I mean, I had a call with Avery and Billy Sitting a week ago, and then John was on with the superintendent's call, right, John McConga? And so I think that there's probably, I mean, I get the sense from Billy and Avery that they're not going to do, that nobody wants to do any practicing. That may change other than cross country. So I know that Boston Latin has cross country, and then also there's a combined, O'Brien and Latin Academy team for cross country, but I get no sense of having them do any on the field stuff so far. That may change because John, correct me if I'm wrong, right? They said no activities until the actual physical reopening in October, right?
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Yeah. So I think that's where they are. I can get a clarification if people want, that they want to, but I think that the BPS is going to go full scale fall, what they're calling fall 2.
Yeah, we were in a call this morning, and Monica Roberts, somebody asked her that question. She was like, "We'll get you a decision between 1 to 3 business days." So I'm just trying to get an insider sort of sense of what you're probably hearing.
I don't know who Monica is. Who's Monica?
She's the academic officer for BPS.
Oh, okay. So they have so it's Avery Esdale and Billy Sitting, who are the actual AD and assistant AD, and then they're actually, their boss is actually a soccer player, and I just forgot his name, but I can ask them again soon. But I think that the latest you had from Boston After School and Beyond and the superintendent call and what I have, I think is the most updated thing. And then just to add, Tenacity is going to do tennis programming for high school kids too. So that there'll be some activity in October when BPS comes back.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, no one else is popping anything in the chat. We'll send out people's contact information. We'll send out the presentation that you can forward to other folks. Don't hesitate to get in touch with anyone with questions. Mike, who is the best person for people to reach out to the Mass Youth Soccer if they have a specific question? Is there one, or does it make a difference?
I mean, it all depends. They can reach out to me anytime, of course. And then if there's any questions with regards to our guidelines and all matters COVID, Tammy Endow is available. Her email is on the website and Return to Soccer Activities website and many more places than one. So Tammy's there as well. And then, of course, if anybody's got, any friends within Mass Youth Soccer that they like to go to first, and give them a try. We all help each other out.
Great. Well, I thank you all so much. I know everybody's really zoomed out, but I hope this was helpful and really appreciate your time.
Yep.
Stay safe and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.